Well, I travelled from Aberdeen down to Dundee, and the train stopped there, and a man and a woman were standing on the platform. And the man got on the train, and the woman said to me, "Look after him. He's never been out of Dundee." That's how I got to know him.
That was my grandfather,
Yeah.
the man. And that journey, that took you south, and you crossed over the Forth Bridge and then down.
We went right down to London, and then a train to
Clacton, was it?
Butlins holiday camp.
And
we were there for a month.
I'm sorry, sir. Would you like to talk to Mark? It would be a conversation.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Are you okay? That position's okay. When you travel down by train, how long a journey did it take? That would have been?
We landed in London about 6 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
At King's Cross. From there we went to what kind of
Clacton, was it?
No, we took we walked from King's Cross down to Paddington, I think it was.
Paddington, that's right.
And got the train from Paddington to Butlins holiday camp in Clacton and Sea.
And that was a converted training camp for the British Army at that time?
Well, it was an outfitting camp. There was no really much any training. And we were there for about 3 weeks. And then left there for Dover. And down to Dover.
And that journey down to Nantes, that by train again, that was a terrible journey.
It took us about 3 days to get to Nantes.
When you arrived in Nantes, you'd never been to France before,
no,
presumably.
No.
What was your impressions of French life when you landed there?
Well, we went into a garage area, and we were there for a few days. And then we moved up to the outskirts of Nantes. And from there we were at Nantes. The river there had been altered, and we built a camp on the old bed of the old river. That was Prairie de Val, I called it, I think.
I have some photographs here that you won't have seen before, but they were supplied by another member of 663. And they're playing cards in this photograph. You probably don't recognise anyone there, but this was in the shot in the billets. I think at Bouguenais, the Anderson there was an Anderson camp established at the airport. So they were. What was the mood amongst the soldiers? It was good-hearted, was it?
Our section never moved to the airport.
Right.
It was the other 3 sections were working at the airport. Our section was working on the Prairie de Val, which was the bed of the old river.
But your billets were together, were they? Yeah. And were you? That was in Nantes. But when the mood of the company, you were saying before, obviously you were with the Royal Engineers, but they were some distance south from the front line. Did you have any indication of how the war was progressing?
No, not really. It was just, we were only there for about 12 weeks, I think. And we had orders to get back up the coast. So it took us about 4 or 5 days marching till we got up to
Saint-Nazaire.
Saint-Nazaire.
Yeah. When the company was told, when Major Morgan, the commanding officer, told the company that you had to evacuate, I believe some of the RAF, some of the other units had started to leave before 663. Yeah. How did you learn? Did Major Morgan give any indication of what was happening?
He never really gave an indication. It was just a case of moving up to Saint-Nazaire. and we slept the night on the road beside the port, beside the harbour, and then moved into the harbour.
And did you know how big a crisis it was in terms of the overall army?
Not really. We didn't know a thing of what was going on at all, really. But when we were waiting, we were in a queue to embark onto the ship. And when we were waiting, and the ship came in, it was a small boat came in to pick up the units. And they said they thought there was enough men on the Lancastria, and there was no more room, but the major said, well, another 240 won't make any difference. So we were taken on the boat about 11 o'clock in the day, and about 1 o'clock or so, I didn't like the way the boat was filling up, and I went looking for a place to more accommodating.
What was your feelings about leaving France under those circumstances?
Well, we didn't know much about what was going on. We were never told what was going on, really. We found out more after the war than we knew where it was going.
There was no sense of panic amongst the troops
No.
generally, or just... It was like Major Morgan had mentioned that they might have to fight when they got back to the UK, and there was that expectation that you know, they were gearing up not for evacuation but to continue the fight.
Yeah, that's right.
And what was the feeling amongst the other men in the company?
There was never much feeling mentioned, really. I don't think there was any doubt about getting back or anything until the bombs started falling.
And your impressions when you boarded the Lancastria, because obviously you'd slept rough in Saint Nazaire the night before. There'd been an air raid, I believe, is that right?
We had plenty of room in the boat at that time, but the boat kept filling up right till nearly 3 o'clock, I think. They never stopped taking people on.
And your impressions of the Lancastria when you boarded, because she was quite an elegant ship.
Yes, it was a nice boat.
And was there opportunity to grab some food or something to drink?
Well, I never got any. I think I got a plate of soup, and that was about all.
And your section was then sent up to the boat deck, I understand, as well, later on to guard the boats, initially, is that right?
That's what we were supposed to do. We were supposed to fix our bayonets and go up and to look after the lifeboats.
And was that because, was there a worry that they might be rushed if there was an incident, or?
Well, that was the captain of the ship had asked the officers to look after that part.
Just going back a step, Charlie, when you arrived in Saint Nazaire, there was a lot of equipment and vehicles being destroyed on the outskirts of Saint Nazaire. Did that not give a sense of urgency? I mean, was there any sense amongst the men that something wasn't quite right?
Well, there was a sense of that, but there was no great anxieties, really, at that time.
Were the men aware of the evacuation at Dunkirk the 2 weeks before?
No, I don't think we had heard of that.
Right. And when I understand, having spoken to other members in the company, as they left, there was some of the local people were obviously thinking they were being deserted.
That's right.
And they had made some comments. Do you have any memory of that?
Not really, no. I don't think there was any panic about ourselves. It was just when the bomb started falling, that was when the trouble started. But that time the ship was really, it couldn't move.
What was your memories of my grandfather on the Lancastria before the attack?
I don't think we were really worried about it. It was just the impression I got after was that he was a bit worried about being up on the top of the ship. I don't know whether it was, but he said he needed the toilet and went away down. And I was left there myself. That's when I said to him, well, if you're going to go down to the toilet, we'll better put our life belts on. And we did that.
Yeah. Sorry, you're just tapping the microphone there. So it's okay. Did my grandfather, did he arrive on the deck the first time you saw him on the ship? When was that? On the deck?
We were together on the boat. And it was only after the boat got so full, I think we lost each other. And I started looking for a quieter place and finished up right in the top of the ship. Nobody there at all. And when I got to there, I said, I went down again to find your father or your grandfather. And I found him and took him up the top. And we were up there, and we were lying really in the sun, just enjoying the sun until the bombs started dropping. And the ship was bombed quite a few times before one time when the bombs came down, they went down the side of the boat, and we got soaked with water. So
there'd been an attack earlier in the day, had there?
Well, there were quite a few attacks on the boat. But that's when your father, I think he didn't like being away from everybody. And he said he was going to the toilet anyway. So I just stayed on the top of the deck. And there was, when the boat was hit, I was hit in the head, just beside the ear, and I collapsed. And when I came to, there was 4 boats on each side of the ship had been launched. And so I got up, when I got up, I went and I climbed into a boat on the starboard side of the boat. And then I saw 2 boats right down near the bottom of the ship. They were sitting on the side of the ship. So when I saw that, and one of them boats got turned over, the passengers all got dropped into the water. So I thought, that's not for me. But there was nobody to unload the boat anyway. So I got out the boat, got on the deck, and collapsed again. And the next time, I came back again. And I had made my mind up I'd go right down to the rear of the ship because the ship was listing down. And I was crossing the deck when a sailor came up. And he said to me, get into that boat. So I just did what I was told. And that's how I got off the boat. The sailor, I think he expected me to help him, but I was always pushing out. And when I come back the first time, we were in the water and sailing away from the ship. And then we kept picking up people out of the water into the boat until the boat was loaded.
But before, when you were on the top deck, did you have your full battle?
Yes, I had everything with me.
And all the men had that with them, all their equipment. And was there an order given to get rid of that at any time?
No, I lost touch with everybody when I was up there.
Remind me how you gave the life jacket to my grandfather.
In a dining room, I think it was. There was just a jacket, there was a few life belts lying on the floor, and I just picked up 2 And when I found your father, I gave him one. And then your father and I went right up the top. And it was only when he said he was needing the toilet, and I said to him, well, we'll better put on our life belts, which we did.
Yeah. Sorry, Mr Napier, it's on the microphone, it's okay, sorry about that. Yeah.
Why did you think they needed it?
Yeah, why did you feel it was necessary to put a life jacket on at that point?
Well, I don't really know how, but it was just, I thought to myself, well, I can't put it on myself.
Right.
Neither could your father, so I just said, you better put these things on before you go down.
Were you expecting?
But I had no indication that the ship was going to be sunk.
Might the thought have been that with the earlier attacks on the ship during the day...
Well, that was why I thought we'll better just put them on anyway.
Right. And were they large? I mean, were the cork life jackets
Yes.
quite big?
Quite big.
And how did you manage to... Did you have your kit... Did you have to take your kit off and leave it nearby, or...?
I think, no, I think we had our kits on all the time.
And had other men around you, did they have their life jackets on? Were they...
There was no, I can't, the memory's just not right. As far as I know, I had the life jacket on until we got to the destroyer, the Havelock, was it?
Yes.
Havelock. And it was then, but by that time I had been passing out quite a few times, and the naval officer on the boat, I don't know what he said, but I got a crewman, took me away. I think he thought I was going to pass away.
Right.
And I was left in a room on the boat, myself, nobody else. So I took off the life jacket, put it down under a table, and went under the table and fell asleep. That was how lucky I was. I woke about 3 o'clock in the morning and went out on the deck of the destroyer and was walking around there, and then there was some of the crew standing on the deck, and there was a man signalling an aircraft, and the aircraft was giving them information. And that was all.
But before the attack, did you know how many people were aboard the Lancastria at that time?
The crewman that I met said there was been 8,500 and 9,000. No, it was the purser. I've forgotten all about that. The purser came onto the deck when I was lying in the sun, and I was looking at him. He just had a white shirt and white trousers, and he looked very worried. So I just said to him, "You're looking awful worried." And the purser said, "I am worried." He says, "I'm the purser." And there's between 8,000 and 9,000 people on this ship. And that was all he said.
Why do you think the estimates were changed after the war then in terms of the capacity?
Well, it was the captain had said there was only about 6,000, I think, on the boat. But he was looking after himself, really, I think.
Sorry.
There was actually two captains on the boat. There was the captain, and the first officer was a captain, a ship's captain as well, but he'd just been on the boat. He'd been picked up by the captain. Might as well do the journey with us. So there was two captains on the boat, but that was the captain and first officer. and then the purser.
Were you aware of the potential threat from the German forces by bombers or by submarines?
Oh yes, we knew that. There had been quite a few planes bombing the ship, but only ones that had come close to the ship. And the ones that sunk the boat went down the funnel, right down through the bottom of the ship. The ship just immediately started. I thought I'd seen it. I thought it was the plane that was hit. But when I looked up, there was something sticking out beside the funnel. And I was going away to say that they've hit them. And then I noticed it was up above the funnel, and it was part of the cargo hold door. It was way up, higher than the funnel.
It had been blown up, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What was your reaction when you realised that there was the ship was being bombed?
Well, my reaction when I saw the deck up on the top of the funnel was, I better get into a boat. So I climbed into a lifeboat. And as I say, I saw the two boats down on the side of the ship. And when I saw that, I thought, that's not for me. But there was nobody to launch the boat, so it doesn't make any difference. But I got out of the boat, went back on the deck, and fell unconscious again. And that's what happened to me.
What was the general reaction?
When you were coming in and out of consciousness on the deck,
Mm-hmm.
were you aware of other soldiers around you?
There's nobody there. There was nobody on the top deck. There never was any. The stairway on the boat had collapsed.
Right.
That was what the sailor that I got into the boat with, said that the stairway had collapsed, and he had managed to get out. But the underdecks were they couldn't get away from it.
And do you have recollections of any movement with the ship? Could you feel the ship beginning
yes,
to sink?
It did. Listed over quickly.
What about noise? Was there much noise? Could you hear?
No, I didn't hear noises. Very little. As I say, I was when I got down into the boat, when the boat was launched, I just seemed to fall unconscious. Sometimes I came out, and then the next time I was away again.
Okay. Change.
Yep. Okay. Do you recognise the position that you were on the ship at that point, Mr. Napier? Do you recognise where you were on the ship at that point?
Well, I had been at the back of the funnel here.
Right. And at that time, I wonder if I could take you back. Did you board on a? How did you physically board the Lancastria? How did you get on board? Was it through a hatchway or?
I had a hatch on the side of the ship.
Right.
But when we got onto the ship, it wasn't nearly as full as it was when it sank.
Did you understand why the boat was there? Or did you understand why the Lancastria hadn't come into Saint Nazaire?
No.
But when you were ferried out to the Lancastria, it's quite a distance.
It's quite a long way.
And did when you're
it took us 2 or 3 days to get there from walking from where we were.
And your thoughts as you approached the ship, was that when they tried to wave the ship away when you approached the Lancastria?
When we approached the docks, we were just thinking there's boats coming in to take us away. But you had to go about 5 miles out from the harbour on a launch, a trawler or a launch. They get loaded onto the launch and taken out the boat. And it was about 5 miles off the coast.
Was there any discussion with the officers or the men as you travelled out? Did you think that was odd? There wasn't any fear that you were travelling back to the UK on the Titan, on the little boat?
We never knew what was going on at all.
And
when we got onto the boat, it was just a case of we got lost. The whole company got dispersed. And your father and I were the only two together for a while.
And you mentioned before that you went up onto the top deck. That was first. You said you had some soup before. Did you? Was your first, when you boarded the ship? Was your first thought? What was your first thought? Was it hunger?
I was quite happy just where we were. It was when the boat started filling up, and you couldn't move. Well, during the war, the whole time, I never liked to be where I couldn't move. And I often got into trouble for not going into air raid shelters, because I didn't like the thought of getting buried. I liked to see what was going on. And that was why I went to explore the boat and found a stairway from the decks up to the top level.
Okay.
And that's when I got up there, and then after a while I thought, I'll go and find your father. And went down, found your father, took him up, and we did lie in the sun for quite a while, just enjoying the sun.
And do you remember any discussions at all at that time?
No, it was just we weren't really thinking about getting sunk or anything. And as I say, the Lancastria had I was thinking about 28 lifeboats. And when I came back, after the boat was hit and I was hit, when I came back from that, you could see all the boats, and there was just the 4 boats on each side of the ship that had been launched. And that was all that had been launched.
Why?
But do you know why that was? Do you know why that was?
Well, there's no great demand. When the stairway collapsed, the people that were under that stairway, there was no demand for boats.
And
there wasn't people up on the top deck.
As you were looking over, you presumably looked over the side.
Hmm?
Did you look over the side? Is that how you saw the boats that had been launched?
That was the only ones I saw, was the ones on the starboard side that were sitting on the side of the boat. I never saw the other 4 getting launched.
And was there people in the water at that time?
There was people in the water, yes. But the people on the starboard side, the boats had been collapsed. There was still 4 people, I think, on the 2 boats. But they were down near the water. And I think they were going on arguing about something anyway. But that's when I passed out once. I passed out quite a few times, actually.
There was once you got into the water, and you were in the sea.
I wasn't in the sea, no.
No.
No, I got down. The seaman that came up the deck when I was going to cross and go down to stern, and said to me, "Get into the boat," and he must have launched the boat himself.
So, and that was on the davits down, was it?
No, that was on the port side.
And was there other people in the lifeboat with you?
No, there was nobody there but him and me. But as I say, I kept, after the boat was, I don't remember even the boat getting launched. But when it was in the water, I was moving away from the boat when I came back to life. And then we started picking up people out of the water. But I always kept falling, collapsing again. And the boat, before when we got to the, what you call the I can't remember the name of the ship. Havelock. When we got there, the boat was packed. I just stepped into it. It was at that time.
When the other men were trying to come into the lifeboat?
Yes, that's when we picked them up, picked them out of the water.
Was that easy? Was that quite easy to get them out?
No, it wasn't easy.
Why?
Why?
Because they were waterlogged and just struggling away. It wasn't an easy job to do. But as I say, I didn't do very much of it. I was just collapsing. I must have lost a lot of blood because when I got to the destroyer, I think the man thought I was going to pass away. And I was put in a room myself.
And do you remember the oil roundabout? Do you remember the oil roundabout the lifeboat that you were in?
I saw some of it, aye. But very little. I was the luckiest person on the boat, I think.
Once you were in the lifeboat, do you remember the Germans attacking still?
Not really, no. Not really.
Let's talk about the aftermath then.
There was 2 or 3 other boats, you see, loading. A cargo ship was there. It was about a mile from the Lancastria. There was a cargo boat, and all the holds in the cargo were full of men as well. I couldn't tell you the name of the boats.
Mm-hmm. When you got back to the UK, and do you remember landing? Where did you land?
The Havelock landed at Plymouth. I can remember that. And I can remember walking up the quay at Plymouth. And there was a battle cruiser. It was a cruiser. And it was the Essex cruiser. And it had been at the River Plate, was it?
Yes.
Was that where there was a big battle there? And the ship was just a massive burnt bits on the boat. And I just thought to myself, well, if that's one of the boats that won, what like were the ones that were lost?
And from there, you went on? Where did you go after Plymouth?
Well, we went for a few days at Devonport, and then we travelled from there right up to Leeds. And we had a few days at Leeds, and then we were put home for 48 hours. It took me about 48 hours to get home, never mind. But I was just home for about 12 hours and back down again, down to Leeds. And then from there, we went to the Faroe Islands.
Uh-huh.
The Faroe Islands, that was away near Iceland.
When you landed, was there any instruction about mentioning the Lancastria?
We were told not to speak about it.
And who told you that? Who told you that? Who said that?
The Major. We had lost, our company had lost 97 men on the boat. The news had been so bad, coming from France, and we were just told not to speak about it.
And what was your thoughts about not being able to speak about it?
Well, it was just an order, and we just obeyed it, I think. We knew why it was. The news had been so bad at that time they didn't want any more bad news.
What was your feelings after the war about mentioning the Lancastria? What was your feelings about that?
Well, as I say, the company was made up to full strength and at Leeds, and that was about a fortnight after the Lancastria had been sunk. We were made up to full strength, and then when the Faroe Islands came up, we were half strength again. The company was divided into two again, and it was only half of the company went to the Faroe Islands.
The last time you saw my grandfather, can you describe that? Where did you last see him?
Well, that was when he went away down to the toilet. It's the last time I saw him.
What did you think had happened
And
to him?
I thought he had just been killed, because
Sorry,
Okay, yeah.
we should get you back.
when I got married, I
Yeah.
went to Dundee on my honeymoon,
Right.
and
Well, yeah, sorry, we'll have to do that bit again because I have to be sitting here for this. Are you okay just now? Would you like
Yeah.
some water?
no, I'm all right.
You're okay. I might need water. Oxygen.
We can have a pause if you.
Yeah. Do you want to have a break for a moment?
That's all right, yeah.
Okay.
What's that?
That's on the Norway. It's not the boat deck. It's the one just down from there. They had a boat on it, but these are all men who were involved in the Norway campaign.
I never saw that kind of boat.
Mm-hmm.
The Lancastria boats were all double.
Doubled. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think there was about 14 boats on each side of it.
Uh-huh.
And
You think you were just behind this?
that's just where I
Yeah.
was.
Uh-huh. In what direction did my grandfather go then? Did he come back this way?
Couldn't tell you, I was
Yeah.
never down again. you
Right,
see.
yeah.
It wasn't long after he left that the boat was set.
Yeah.
And as I say, I thought they would hit the plane.
Yeah.
I was going to wear a cheer when I found out it was
All
part
right.
of the boat.
Yeah. I remember doing an interview with a woman who was 100 years old in Orkney, and she witnessed the first attack in Orkney. And she said as the planes came over, they thought they were RAF planes, so they were all like waving at them. And then that's them then, must be these. And that's the ones you got off on then, eventually, was it? It was one of those that you came away. See, this photograph, this is where the single was, I think. See, this is the next deck down, so it's in this position. It's where that photograph's been taken.
Well, I was right up on the top of the ship,
Yeah.
I know that.
See, yeah.
And as I say, when it was hit, it was...
That's the funnel here. So.
This is the funnel.
Here, yeah.
Well, that I am. Well, I must have been back here, in here. But I don't think that's the way the lifeboats were at that time.
I mean, these are doubled.
Double
but,
boats.
Okay. Right, where do you want to pick it up from? Thanks.
We would just need to tell if he was aware that your grandfather survived, and then if he was aware that he survived partly thanks to him.
Okay.
Or completely.
Yeah.
And
Wait, you wouldn't know because you thought he died, so.
but you can
Right,
tell
yeah,
him
okay.
first.
Okay, well, what we'll do is. You okay?
Just a minute. Yeah.
when we were on the Faroes Island, we were on a little island called Tofter, and there was about 10 of us on this island. We were putting up guns from the ships, naval guns, which fire about 20 miles. And one night a lad came into the hut. He said, "I think there's some Germans on the shore." And so we got our rifles, loaded, and we went away out. And suddenly we saw the party coming along the side of the rocks. And we were ready to go until somebody said, "They're speaking Gaelic." It was Lovat Scouts.
Right.
On an exercise.
They hadn't told.
The Lovat Scouts, and they all spoke Gaelic.
Yeah.
And the boy thought it was German that was speaking.
Yeah.
So we nearly started the war.
Going just briefly back to going briefly back to when you were on the Lancastria. You saw my grandfather. You saw my grandfather. Describe you saw him for the last time, and tell me how you felt in terms of what happened to him. What you thought.
I wasn't worried about it. I thought he might come back, but he just said he was going to the toilet. Have to go to the toilet, and that was it. And I wasn't really thinking about the boat getting sunk. But then it did get sunk.
The fact that.
And when I never heard from your father,
Yeah.
when I never heard from your father, I presumed he was killed with the ship.
And
Because, as I say, I was married after I came out of the army, went to Dundee on my honeymoon. And if I'd known your father was alive, I would have went to visit him.
And at what point do you remember? When did you remember that he'd survived then?
I never knew he had survived till it was you who came.
Yeah.
We were never told that who was killed and who wasn't in the boat, on the company.
Have you any sense of? Do you have any sense of the importance of the life jacket that you gave him? Now.
I never really thought much about it, because I never needed mine. It gave you a certain feeling of you'd be all right.
Yeah.
Well, let's do it as if you are telling him now.
Okay. Right.
Okay. So that for you, if you put together the story of your grandfather, it pops out that this is a key moment. It wasn't a key moment for him at the moment, of course, but now you're telling him that.
Yeah. Okay. Just your microphone there, Charlie. Just does that need to be moved up, or is okay then? Yeah. Yeah, we can't hear. Now let me track back first. When I was when okay. When I was growing up, and when our family were growing up, your name was a very familiar name.
So I believe.
And my grandfather had fond recollections of that, because he felt strongly that if you hadn't given him the life jacket, then there's no question he wouldn't have.
The thing that I really remember is when we met in the station on the Dundee, and the woman said to me, "Look after him. He's never been out of Dundee."
And you kept that promise. You kept that promise.
Yeah.
Do you realise now that it's because of that one small act of giving him the life jacket that we're sitting here today?
That's right.
Able to
I suppose that's right.
yes.
I never thought about it that way. Mm.
I don't know if you're aware, but this is the first photograph taken immediately after the Lancastria was hit. You can say she's still afloat, and there's black smoke coming over the stern. We think that that this photograph was taken not by Frank Clements, who was the man who was on the Highlander, but by another photographer, because the different format in the photograph. But this must have been just less than a minute after, I suspect. Something else. This is the war diary for 663. This is the diary that Major Morgan kept.
Oh, yeah.
And these are his words. You can see Major Morgan. And I've got other pages over by, but this is him describing the attack on the Lancastria.
He was a good major.
He was quite strict, though, was he, before the Lancastria?
To a degree, he was a very human man.
Yeah.
I know a lad that was, when we were in Barton Stacey, when we were down near London, and this lad used to live about 40 miles away from where we were. And on the Saturday, he went away to get a hitchhiker lift home for the weekend. And the car he hitchhiked was the Major's car.
Oh.
And so the Major just said, well, all right, be sure you come back on for Monday morning.
Right, I see.
And he took him all the way to where he was going. And
Yeah,
so he was a human man.
yeah. He'd been based in Arbroath before the Second World War.
Major Morgan.
Major Morgan, yeah, because he had the military cross for his
Yes, that's right.
actions in the First War.
So
The captain was Captain Holloway. And he was one of the Holloway brothers that used to be builders in London.
Right.
He was a posh man.
I just, when you were mentioning about the boats being doubled, I got this photograph from the Imperial War Museum, and I thought the same thing as you when I saw it. I thought, why is there not two boats piled up? And I wonder, because the caption on the photograph is Lancastria returning from Norway, but I wonder, in fact, if maybe that's in the background and this is actually another vessel. That might explain the difference.
St Lancastria definitely had two boats all the way.
Yeah. There's no way just looking at that davit there, I don't think a boat could get under there. But is this the kind of cork jackets that you were wearing? These are they're wearing life jackets here, look. Is that similar?
Seems to be the same thing, yes. Yes, that's them.
I think Reg Brown was with you in the Faroe Islands, and he told me one thing. I don't know if it's accurate or not, but he said on the journey up to the Faroe Islands, he said you could spot Lancastria survivors because they were all wearing their life jackets.
That's right.
You know,
I was one of them.
yeah.
Just look at another.
Yeah.
Just the image of.
Yeah. This is a squad photograph. You changed the headgear when you went to the Faroe Islands. You had berets, didn't you? Did you not after that?
We had berries, yes, and then it was later that they put on the. I'm not sure which way it went.
They're all on to the right-hand side there, so it might have been the same, perhaps.
It was the berries were put on in Germany, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And this photograph was taken. This must have been in France. This photograph, because they got the trench coats on. Because the other photographs that I've seen in the Faroe Islands, you're all wearing the berets and more general fatigues that they were wearing. So you all had trench coats when you went to France, did you?
I just can't remember.
Right. And you don't recognise any of these men here in this photograph?
Well, I just can't see them properly.
No, it's not big enough. This man here is the man who applied, this man applied for a medal. He was in 663. There's a Lance Corporal here, I think. I don't know who he is. But you said a lot of the NCOs were friends with the Major. Is that right?
I don't think so.
No. They didn't go on. Why was Major Morgan called Vang Sang Morgan? How did that name come about? How did Major Morgan get his nickname?
His medal?
No, his nickname is Vang Sang Morgan. How did that name come about?
That was when we went to France the first time. And he didn't like the thought of the men spending their money. And he limited the money to it was just a few francs a week. And that was just to keep you from going astray.
Yeah, yeah. But that was only for the married men, though, was it?
Right.
And what happened to that money? That would have been lost on the Lancastria.
No, the money was saved for the men.
Right, I see. And Percy Brown told me that
The Major even enjoyed that song.
Yeah.
Major Morgan's.
Yeah. You don't want to sing it for us? No. Percy Brown actually told, because they had a band, didn't they? The company 663 had a kind of band with Percy Brown and others in it.
They tried everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And two of our sergeants were going about with them then.
Yes. One of them married.
And they married each other.
Yeah.
I don't know after the war, but just while the war was on. But Aileen Muse, Sergeant Muse was Aileen Muse's husband.
Yes.
And it was her that did all the organising of the company meetings.
Yes.
And the first meeting was 20 years after the war.
Uh-huh.
And she went to the War Office and got names and addresses and wrote letters to everybody.
Yeah.
And I went, my wife and I, we went down. We were going down to London anyway, but went to London and that was the first meeting. Was in London in 1960 something.
Uh-huh. But this wasn't for the Lancastria, this was for the company. This was the 663.
This was just a company meeting, yes. And then she organised that meetings for quite a few years.
Yeah.
Mark, sorry. Would you like to ask
Yes.
Mr. Napier, what's his memory of your grandfather in terms of, was he an outgoing,
okay.
funny guy, or rather silent, or what kind
She had a good way of putting it. She said, I can't remember what it was, but she says, I can still put one foot in front of the other.
Yeah. So she was game.
Aye, Mrs. Muse. We went home with her once from Wales. Went home with Derek and her. And stayed the weekend there, and she took us down to Brighton.
Right. And what was your recollection of my grandfather as a person? What kind of person was he?
He was a nice lad, but we were just, both of us were the same kind, with very little experience of the world.
Yeah.
That's the way I would say it anyway.
The first time visited you, Charlie, I don't know if you remember, but your late wife was sitting and you told the story of the Lancastria, and she seemed very surprised because she didn't seem to have known anything about the Lancastria. Was that because you felt an obligation not to mention it, or?
I just don't know. I just tried to block it out, I suppose.
And
it was a bad time in her life.
Uh-huh. You never talked about that part of the war. Was it because of the bad memories, or?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, we lost quite a few friends.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the Faroe Islands made us more civilised. There was the Lovett Scouts were up. They spoke Gaelic.
Mm-hmm.
All the time they were here, in the Nappies or anything, they were all speaking Gaelic.
Right.
And it was such a surprise to hear
Yeah.
Scots language. I don't understand Gaelic.
Uh-huh.
But they did everything. Gaelic, they did their drills, the wheel, they didn't turn about, the wheel.
Yeah. All the time. They were like that all the time. Were they?
I did that all the time.
Uh-huh.
It was all to the old-fashioned army.
Uh-huh. Well, you've just mentioned about the Faroe Islands. I don't imagine there would be much of a social life in the Faroe Islands compared to France, was there? Was there a big contrast?
The Faroe Islands were an eye-opener to me, as far as the Faroese used to live mostly in whales, whale meat.
Right.
And they dried the meat. It was horrible meat to me.
Right.
But they had the Icelanders brought their fish down to the Faroe Islands, and it was put out in the rocks
Okay.
to dry.
When you were in just a cutaway, so they're not recording for sound this one. But you mentioned you were up in this area, was it? And did the planes come this direction? What direction did they come? Do you remember? Because I believe the sun would have been up here, and other survivors.
I think that's right. Yes.
And they came down.
I think that's right.
Yeah. Could you point where you were, Charlie? Could you point?
Well, I think it'd be just in here.
Right.
I was a bit clear because I could see I'm over there, you see.
Uh-huh. And where were these boats that you said had been partially launched? Where were they in position to where you were when you looked over? Do you remember? You said there was two that had been lowered. I suppose the orientation might have been difficult because...
I think it must have been about there.
Right.
The boats. There was two from each side.
Uh-huh.
Had disappeared when I woke up.
Right.
Does he know where the bombs hit? Approximately?
Are you aware in relation, this is the full ship, are you aware where the bombs struck the Lancastria?
Well, some of them went down the chimney.
Uh-huh.
I do know that, but there must have been some went through a cargo hole as well.
Right. We now know from some surveys that have been done on the wreck, but also from other eyewitness accounts, because Percy Brown was down here when the ship was sunk, and he said the hatchway here, number 2 hold, was blown completely off. The hatch had gone completely off. Mm-hmm. So perhaps, it maybe landed up here. Is that possible?
Well, I thought Reg Brown was here at this end of the ship.
Reg was Percy, who was in the band, the driver, Percy Brown.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, he was down.
But Reg Brown was here somewhere.
Uh-huh. Reg told me that he ended up in the water quite near to where Major Morgan was, and there was a group of men from 663 around him. But I think they got off on the starboard side. Mm-hmm. So you would have been on the other side, the port side. Is that right? Towards the stern.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
We went on the port side.
Did you see the ship actually go down then?
Not actually sunk, no.
No. Okay.
Was there another photo that you were talking about? Maybe the one with the cards.
With the cards, yeah.
They're
Where is
playing
that?
Cards.
Somewhere there.
It's the small one. You could ask again about the life in France. We didn't really
Okay.
go for that, but the mood, was.
Yeah. This is a group of men from the company, from 663 company, and they're playing cards. I mean, was that the kind of was that a regular thing? You played cards, and what other activities did you do in the spare time?
We did play cards, yes.
Uh-huh. And football?
Football, yes.
Because
once the company was in the Isle of Wight, we used to have football matches every week.
uh-huh.
Like different sections of the company played each other every week.
Was there much competition between the
Yes,
sections?
quite a lot. You could lose your feet.
Right. And how did presumably the men in different sections, they got on well enough, did they?
There was a certain jealousy between the company sections.
Right. But nothing too serious?
Hmm?
Nothing too serious?
No, I don't think so. We went to, what do you call it, Portland Basin, I think it was, you called it.
Uh-huh.
And we put out this pipe. And by the 9th day, I think it was, we were supplying the whole British Army with fuel.
Right.
Well, if we could do that, what was we used to put it on?
Yeah, yeah.
But they said that the trouble was that they didn't have enough tankers
Right.
to keep the war in Egypt going.
Uh-huh.
That's why they had to have the Pluto line.
I see. And you were involved in the construction all the way through as the pipeline was fed. The company was involved in the construction of the pipeline in France.
Right through France, right through to Germany,
Yeah.
right through to over the Rhine.
And after the end of the war, what happened? Were you demobbed immediately?
Well, after the war was finished, I had a good job.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking for materials for, it was the Canadian Army I got employed with. I was looking for materials to build a big extension onto the castle they had.
All right. Uh-huh.
And it was a difficult job in Germany, getting materials for building.
Uh-huh.
There'd been so much destruction.
Was this with the commission? Was this with the commission, the British Commission that was set up, or was it a private company?
No, it was the Canadian Army.
Oh,
The
right.
2nd Canadian Army was
Okay.
in this big castle place. And they were needing an extension on for dining rooms and sleeping quarters for the staff.
Yeah.
And that was why I got the job, looking for material to
Yeah.
build this. Bricks. You got to find, I did find bricks and slates and tiles. And
Yeah.
I was all over Germany.
Right. Because you arrived in France the first time, and you said you hadn't really seen much of the world.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of the war, you must have felt
Well,
as
I
if you'd
saw
seen a
a
good
lot of
part.
Germany.
Yeah.
A lot of Germany.
Mark,
Yeah.
Because we finished up at Brunswick,
All right. Okay.
right about 7 miles from Berlin.
Uh-huh. Sorry.
And then we let Mr. Napier go.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I think he must be tired. If there is one memory from the
Question. It's the last question. Thinking back to the time before the Lancastria, when you were in France from January to June, what was the one impression of life in France that you remember the most? What was
Very
it?
backward.
Right.
France was a way back from, you see. They were still in the Stone Ages when we were quite high at that time.
And what led you to that conclusion?
Well, the main thing was the bathhouses. You had to go to this, and all the women in Nantes used to take their washing down to the washroom, do their washing, making back their houses. And I just thought it was half a primitive.
Right.
And all the men went to this place for a shower.
So you thought the standard of living wasn't so good?
It wasn't as good as ours. Ours wasn't great, but it wasn't bad.
Yeah. But were there like how to say funny situations arising from that?
I've forgotten that was.
Yeah. Was there anything that was quite humorous that you remember from that period?
No, I mean sorry, but
no.
the fact that they were taking their
showers,
I see. Women were taking their, I just imagined the situation.
He's asking, did you find it amusing that the women were washing in that way?
Well, yes. And then there was the prostitutes.
Yes.
The cafes for all the prostitutes.
Because the company were based in the red light district of Nantes at the time, weren't they? And
it was rather eye-opening.
Yeah.
But let's just have two sentences about it. Ask if there was any retortion or any punishment made on his regiment that arose from that situation.
Yeah, well, there was.
Incite him to.
Okay. Was there any consequences for the men in the company as a result of where they were located so close to the red light district? Was there any consequences as a result of that?
No, there's nothing happened really. It was just a case of the major used to always give us a lecture about the woman in red.
He had very high moral standards for the men. And that was the reason then he went on. He did something with the pay. That's
what Van Sank Morgan. 25 francs, and that wasn't it would take you very far.
No. And that was deducted from just the married men.
Okay, last. C'est 3 causes de pied de table, peut-être? Non, ça va? Okay.
No, I think Major was a good man.
Just let him show this photo and then that's it.
Okay.
Just for the cutting. Good.
So just looking and just a discussion. This is not. This is just for another cutaway. They're not recording the sound here. Explained to you before. This is one of the French vessels that was circling, and just off here you can't see it, but the Havelock was moving in towards the Lancastria from this direction, and she went round.
That's probably the boat that took us to the Havelock.
Right. Because this is shortly after she was hit, obviously, because she's still fully upright and smoke coming over the bridge.
There's certainly a trawler that we took that went to the ship with.
Was there ever any discussion with the men afterwards why the captain didn't leave before when the ship was fully loaded?
Well, that's what I could never understand why he didn't move. I assumed that it was the wattle ship that had told them, because the naval ship there should be in charge of all the boats. But the boat never moved. It was a sitting duck.
And why? I mean, it's easy with hindsight, I suppose. It's easy looking back to say you should have done this or should have done that. But at that point, some of the other ships had pulled up anchor and were at least manoeuvring around the water to be less of a target, but not the Lancastria.
I could never understand why that happened. Why it never moved at all.
I think one of the reasons might have been that the captain had no sleep for 48 hours, and when they anchored in the morning, he'd gone to his cabin to rest. And
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, and I think he never gave the specific enough orders, to take the necessary precautions. But
I do know that the purser was very worried.